going to talk precision marketing and geofencing. Again, my name is Brett Anderson, Evangelist, Network Center, Interactive Services. My job is to spread the gospel of technology, specifically bridge the gap from the non-technical business side to the technical solutions that make everything work. The group we have, our team is called Interactive Services. So a group of talented developers, software engineers, analysts, project managers, etc. What are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk precision marketing, geofencing. Specifically, we're going to tell 3 stories, and I'm going to give context, right? So these 3 stories, the reason I'm going to describe them is so you get an understanding of where we are today and why precision marketing works. And I don't know if that's an industry term. That's just a term I gave it, so I'll describe what it means once we get to precision marketing, and you'll see how it functions. So let's play a game. A disruptive innovator, last name starting with the letter Z. Last 5-10 years, name one person who's innovated something interesting on the internet. Last name starts with Z. Louder? Great one, right? Invented, him and his colleagues, invented Facebook. Fantastic disruption of communication. Let's play another game. Anybody know who this guy is? No? This is Ethan Zuckerman. He's currently an MIT professor. Back in 1994, he worked for a company called Tripod. He and a colleague built a tool to create your own web page. So 1994, create your own web page. Hey, this is great, right? You don't need to be necessarily a developer. I can create some sort of content management system, build my own web page. The problem was it took off like he never expected. The effect on Tripod was their hosting bill went from $5,000 a month to $100,000 in a month. In 1 month, their hosting bill jumped that high. So he needed to find a way, as his boss calls him into his office, says, hey, great, thanks for disrupting the marketplace. I now have a bill 20 times larger than I expected. We need to figure out a way to generate revenue. You know what he came up with? He came up with a pop-up window. The pop-up window is no longer around, but I'll take you back now. The pop-up window is one of those things that would pop up and give a little advertisement, right? And people would pay for sponsorship on site, and then the pop-up window could close. But then the pop-up window just evolved into a bad experience, right? You hated it, it was terrible, it ruined your experience, and then you start installing pop-up blocker software. And so now, in the late 90s, early 2000s, pop-up blocker software becomes popular. Ethan Zuckerman's invention, his ineloquent invention of the pop-up, is no longer generating revenue. And what happens after that to start paying for sites? Data brokers. Anybody heard of the term data brokers? These are the firms in the industries that online gather your information and they sell it and they make money off it. And what Ethan Zuckerman, he came out a couple years ago, was telling a story about how he created the pop-up. He believes that had he come up with a more eloquent solution for raising money, right, to sponsor the websites, to pay for his hosting bill, than the pop-up, data brokers wouldn't have been born out of this. He believes that it may not be necessary to do the mining of data that data brokers are responsible for. So how much data are we talking about? An enormous amount of data, just absolutely enormous amount of data. In 1992, we were creating 100 gigabytes a day of data. 5 years later, 100 gigabytes an hour. 5 years later, 100 gigabytes a second. Now we're creating 50,000 gigabytes a second of data. So 90% of all the data that's been created has been created in the last 2 years. So all this data that's out there, somewhat unstructured, somewhat unfocused, but there are companies that are gathering all this information and building a dossier on you and me. And they're selling it. They're making money from this. They're profiting from it. I talked about this 2 years ago at nVision, but I highly recommend you watch this 60 minutes. Even though it's 2 years old, it is still very relevant and fantastic. It's called The Data Brokers, and they talk about a company called Axiom. At that time in 2014, Axiom had 1,500 pieces of information on 200 million Americans via aggregation. So how do they do it? You go to a website, they start gathering information of where you've been, what you've done, what other sites you've visited. They also sponsored reputable websites, Good Parenting, TS Healthy Living. You could go out there and you could learn about healthy living, being a great parent, but guess what they were doing? They were pulling up surveys, they were asking questions about your baby, what formula do you use, what diapers do you... They were gathering information about you in your household, birthdays, all this stuff. They were capturing all this data about you and building an online profile of each individual American. Fast forward, I went out to search on Axiom, and Google asked me to know my location, which I found I was not able to recreate it. Obviously, I denied this, but Google wanted to know where I'm located, and I wonder if Axiom wasn't the culprit behind that, wondering, again, building a dossier on me. Who's searching for us, right? Oh, Brett Anderson. Okay, let's add to his file of information we have. In addition to Axiom, Idicorp is another corporation that's out there that as of 2016, they have 2,000 pieces of information on every single American. AllAmericanSavings.com, SamplesandSavings.com, email, addresses, birth. They know whether you have arthritis, diabetes, depression, asthma. These data brokers know everything about you based on your online web experience. So, born out of the death of the ineloquent pop-up blocker, you get these data brokers who are mining information, and the sites are receiving revenue to have these plugins placed on their website to gather this information about you. So how do you know that this is happening? One of the pieces of software you can install on your browser is called Disconnect. And what's interesting about Disconnect is it will tell you what collection sites are gathering information about you, and you can block them. This is a visual example of jumping out to the New York Times website, and you can see all those little circles. Those are data collection sites or plugins or tools on New York Times. New York Times has over 117 partner sites collecting information about your session, your experience. Surprising. I think that's surprising. From the New York Times? I could expect it from TMZ. Maybe not New York Times. I was shocked by that. Matter of fact, if you go to Harvard Business Review and you have Disconnect loaded on your browser and it's turned on, Harvard Business Review won't even load. Because it won't load unless it can start gathering information on you. So this is big business, right? This is absolutely massive, the amount of information they're collecting on you. And they're doing it from browsing, right? But it's also happening with your cell phone, what programs you're watching, how you're shopping online, even to some extent brick and mortar perspective from your credit cards. In addition to this, they're tying out your location. Where are you shopping? What are you doing? Where are you doing it? Gathering all this information, the dossier. Taking this one step further, this quote here from Ford saying, we know everything about what you're doing. You got GPS in your car? We know. We know where you're going. We know what you're doing. Matter of fact, when this came out at CES 2.5 years ago, people were fairly shocked by it. I don't think people are shocked by it today. Fast forward, just 2 years later, right? Matter of fact, when this came out, Ford contacted all the media outlets who reported this quote and had them pull it off. They didn't want it out there because they knew that people were going to be outraged. I had a friend of mine who bought his son a Volkswagen Golf, and it's got the TPMS, tire pressure monitor system on it, that went off, and he went and put air in the tire, but he didn't reset the warning message that his tire pressure was low. The dealership called him saying, hey, you've had this on for a couple days. You want to come in and take care of it? Oh, we took care of it. Okay, reset the light. Isn't that crazy? So there's so much information out there that's being collected about you. It's fascinating. John Deere took it even further. If you know somebody who owns John Deere tractor, they're probably in agriculture, they're probably fairly handy. They told the Copyright Office that you don't own your tractor. We own it. John Deere owns it. You're just using it. You're just borrowing it. You're just paying for the right. We don't want you working on it. We don't want you trying to fix it. You need to come to our service base to take care of it. And really, I don't want to call the ultimate offender, but the ultimate collector of information is Google. Searching, advertisements, buy devices, at the very least and at the most, they know everything you're doing. And that's not a joke. They know absolutely everything you're doing. And I tell you a story. This past spring, I don't have my phone with me. I switched from an iPhone to a Google phone. And I did it purposely, consciously, because I wanted to see what the experience was going to be like, right? I just wanted to experience going from iOS to Android and get a feel for it. And I also consciously made the choice to open everything up, right? I want to go through the experience of Google knowing a lot about me and what can they do for me, right? I want to feel what I can get back on it. So turning this on, one of the things it did was from a location perspective, this is just a quick little snapshot over a couple months of where I've traveled. You can see this, if you go to Google Maps, you can check your timeline if you're logged in. You can see where your mobile phone's been. So you guys can tell I went down to Minneapolis, I went down south to Faribault, Minnesota to watch a hockey game. I did a couple trips up to Glacier Park. Took 2 different routes to that. I went through Billings one time, and then I went up north of Miles City another time. Up in Grand Forks a few times. Google Maps knows what I'm doing. So I've opened myself up to Google to collect everything that's going on about me. Specifically, you can drill down and see even more detail. I didn't scrub this map, but I had to make sure I didn't go someplace I shouldn't have been going. But you can tell where I've been in Fargo. And this is only, you can set a window of time to see where the dots land. This is only over a couple, 3-6 month period, so it's not very long early this year. So you take this, and what Google's tracking about you, right? I don't believe I opted in either. This is an opt-out situation. We'll come back around to that in a little bit. But Google knows so much about where I'm going and what I'm doing. But it's interesting, I kind of like the way it services me too, right? Google Now, I swipe to the right on my phone, tells me all the news stories that I find important, all the stocks I want to know about, technology-related things, hockey, things like that, right? The stuff I'm interested in, it feeds me information so that my experience on my device is tailored to what I like to see. Take Google one step further. Anybody hear that Google's got a new Wi-Fi router system coming up? Buy a 3-pack for your home. Easy way to do it. Do you think they're going to collect information from you? Do you think it's going to be opt-out? I would expect it, right? I'm still going to buy it. I'm still going to give it a try. But I tell you what I am going to do is I'm going to switch over to a black phone too. I'm going to try that. I think January 1, I've talked about getting offline. I don't know if I can do it, but that's another discussion point. But I think I'm going to try to go offline and see how it functions. So what should you do relative to these data brokers? Well, personally, you should be aware of it, right? If at one extent, or one extreme, you should certainly be aware of what's being collected, what information is out there about you, and possibly scrub it. Professionally, what should you do? Well, from your business perspective, you need to protect it. But the reality is, you should probably leverage it. Why not take advantage of it? It's almost as if it's okay what's going on today. MIT Technology Review with Oracle, the rise of data. This is a key differentiator in experiences customers will have and how you can leverage that stickiness we talked about on the opening session. It is an absolute important tech trend to leverage data. But is it okay? Depends on who you ask, right? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Edward Snowden came out. I'm not going to go through the historical details of Edward Snowden and what my thoughts are on him. But he came out and demonstrated all these things that are happening, from the PRISM program to XKeyscore. If you saw the movie, some of it's realistic, some of it's true, some of it's Hollywood. But it's just fascinating that he came out and he says, public, this is what your government is doing. This is how Verizon Wireless is corroborating. Here's what Facebook is doing as well. Here's what GCHQ, which is the CIO counterpart in London, England, is doing, right? They're corroborating. They're tracking everything from judges to presidents to you and me. And they don't have to do it without a warrant. They don't have to do it with a warrant. They can just gather all the information. And you know what happened? People were fairly upset. But are they really upset now? I'd argue not. I don't think people really are all that concerned. So I think we've kind of reached a tipping point. It's almost an acceptance. Do I agree with it? Do I think it's right? I'm not going to give you my opinions on it, but I'll tell you that I don't think there's enough people that are going to have enough outrage that are going to stop what's going on. This train is down the track, it's left the station, and this information that is being collected on us is being collected on us, and it's going to be used. And so you have an opportunity, right? You have an opportunity to jump in front of it and leverage it. And that's what we talk about in terms of a unified Internet of Things, unified experience, right? That mobile mesh we talked about. Some of this data and some of this information can be used to make that effective. Like I said, I like the experience that I have from the Google perspective, where it tailors stories to me and things like that. I think it's fantastic. Taking it one step further, is this appropriate? A push notification from my Yahoo Weather app. I didn't sign in for this. I didn't sign up for it. This is opt-out. How about this? Traffic. Of course, I don't necessarily recall opting in for Google alerts related to traffic. I certainly didn't opt out, but they probably just said, hey, we're going to track some of your information. You cool with it? I'm like, yeah, whatever. Go ahead, right? And this is what you get. Now, is this useful and helpful? It certainly is. But it just tells you push notifications down to my phone from Yahoo, Google are being handled frequently, and they're being handled via opting out, right? So I didn't opt in. They opted out. I have to opt out for them. So where are we at today? So context, right? We go from pop-up windows and the ineloquent solution to data brokers mining data online and the experience, to Edward Snowden coming out saying, listen guys, all this stuff that's being collected of you is being used by everybody else, and your government is a big-time player in this process. To push notifications that are really an opt-out process, right? It's by default, you're in on it. And like I said, I postulate that no one cares significantly, right? And so this information is something you could certainly leverage. So think about your customers' data, right? Think about all the information you can have on them. I think the great example is banking. And I've had some conversations with financial institutions about this. But think about what you know about a person's transactions. How much money they make, when they get deposits, what loans they have, mortgages, auto loans, debt ratios, ability to borrow, credit ratings. From a manufacturing perspective, you can look on both production side and the selling, purchasing side. But think about what you know around producing things and inventory management. But there's so much data around what you're doing in your business that if you start to leverage it, you can really start making a difference. And that's where we believe precision marketing comes in. So the notion behind precision marketing is you can create an experience tailored for your users based on their behaviors. And if we agree and we postulate that consumers are comfortable knowing that all this information is being collected about me, and the experience you're going to give them is going to be enjoyable and it's going to benefit them, why not be marketing to them? Why not be selling? Why not look for growth in those opportunities? So the ideation we've got, and we have it in practice with a couple things. Come to our Push Save Disrupting Technology later today. We talk about push notifications and specifically that app. But what we'll talk about is this kind of 6-step process, and you can tie in a 7th step if you want to tie it to your core data. But if you had a content management system that allowed you to specify in particular areas what messages you wanted to be delivered, that would be fantastic. So, familiar with Fargo-Moorhead? You know this area? West of I-29, north of West Acres, what is littered all over that place? You cannot get away from them. Car dealerships? I would bet that 70% of the cars being sold get sold from that area. There's probably, well, Corwin's got all their dealerships there. There's Gateway there. There's Valley Imports. There's FF Fisher. There's another one across the street from FF Fisher, Adams Car Lot. There's Interstate Motor Cars is there. There's a lot of car dealerships there, right? Lundy, or the old Lundy, I don't know if they're Lundy anymore. Kia's there, Mercury dealer, right? So there's a lot of things there. What if you dropped a pin in that area and specified a particular radius? Half a mile, 1 mile. So for in this area, at this radius, I want to define messages that are going to be sent. So from a banking perspective, entering the first circle, leaving the first circle, I'm going to send a notification related to auto loans. What I want this to say is, hey, your bank has fantastic rates on auto loans. Would you like us to give you a call on Monday? We can talk about it. Should we call you on the next business day? Oh, interesting. Driving around looking for a car. Hey, my bank pinged me. This is cool, right? Do you want to send that notification when they enter the radius, exit the radius? Put some timing around it, right? Driving that experience based on their location. If they're in South Fargo on a Sunday between 12:30 and 4:30, probably looking for a house, right? Open houses, just kind of tooling around. Hey, got great home loan rates. Want us to give you a call? Save your settings. So this is from an administrator. a council perspective. In your business, you're setting up these notifications, you're setting up these pins, you're setting up the radius. You're determining, you could even set it so far as to say who gets these messages and how frequently they get them. Tie it to your core data. You know customers that are frequently out there shopping, right? These are the people you want to hit. And based on the parameters you defined in setting it up, you can have push notifications pushed to the device. So precise, marketing related to information and data and where they're traveling, even tie it to core data, right? Knowing your customers, what their habits are. The ability to send a message to them specifically is incredibly powerful. No longer do you need to buy or rely only on advertisements on the internet or a radio advertisement or something in the paper, right? You can use your customer's information and push it directly to them. So in conclusion, does this fit for everybody? Maybe. There are certainly ways you can apply it to just about every industry, and we ask you to consider that question, what if? What if you did this? How could you differentiate yourself from your peers? How could you do something different than what your competitors are doing? And we think this is a monumental shift. Now, could we see it tip back and people are offended by all the push notifications? I think certainly if they get out of hand, right? But if you do it responsibly and you do it thoughtfully and you're providing value to your customers, it's an absolute winning way to drive more revenue. Got a couple sources up here. 60 Minutes, Bloomberg's got some great stuff. If you're a podcast guy like I am, driving around town, running kids around, the radio I think is, can I say it's garbage? I don't listen to stuff on the radio. This Reply All podcast is fantastic. It's technology driven, it's technology related, and they tell stories over about a 30-minute window. So two times in the car and you get some good information from it. I'd recommend that podcast. But any questions on precision marketing, geofencing, push notifications? We've got another session coming up later where we're going to talk about a specific app that's going to be using it and how they disrupted the marketplace as well. Any questions? Not that I think I could see very well out there. No? Everybody appreciate you coming. Enjoy the rest of nVision.